pockets and ages, and I've no patience. So won't you please stay a bit longer? You're making me stronger, making me stronger. Stay a bit longer. You're making me stronger, making me stronger. You need stronger.
Cause I'm done cleaning up your mess. Found myself in my regrets. I've become a little stronger now. 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 You cashed in on my promises. You know I'm too generous. Now I've learned to never help you out. Cause I'm done cleaning up your mess. Found myself in my regrets. I've become a little stronger now. A little stronger now.
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me.
I just got three things to say. God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engine!
Well, look who it is. It's Bez Racing Team, Season 4, Race 4. I am, as always, Reagan Letkeman. With me, as always, Stephen Wallace. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. And Reagan, just to clarify for our viewers, you're actually here today, correct? You aren't just a voice recording playing off my stream deck?
Yes, I am currently present.
Yeah, I didn't feel like investing in one of those like AI voice generators for you, and also didn't feel like going back and finding clips. So yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it today. It'll be nice having an actual co-commentator this time around.
Yeah, I'm not going to be much more insightful this week than I was last week, but I will have more to say.
You had some pretty good thoughts about Suzuka. I mean, the track didn't change too much between Season 3 and Season 4, so still some excellent insights from the good old Reagan Letkeman.
Yes, you can pick and choose some interesting things I say once in a while. It's all the rest of it that got cut out. And here we are at Misano. Misano, a tricky track. Lots of twists and turns, and not a lot of straight lines. Stephen, what are your thoughts on the track we're racing on today?
I think my first thought is that people criticize Formula One for being not environmentally friendly. Bez Racing Team, also not the most environmentally friendly. We went from going to two tracks that were basically next door neighbors, Spa and then Zolder, and then we flew all the way over to Japan for Suzuka, and now we're all the way back over here in Italy for Misano. So definitely a lot of freight costs and a lot of pollution caused by good old Bez Racing Team shuttling all these GT3 cars over. But well worth it. Misano is a very fun but tricky track, as we see Bryce Prevost calling it a lap on the start-finish straight there. A very tricky track. The track limits are pretty notorious around here. The cars naturally want to go wide through a lot of these corners, as we see Oystein Brenham very nicely take the turn 1, 2, 3 complex here. Yeah, cars naturally want to go wide. some pretty tight but fast corners. So if you want to maximize the track width and your lap time, you really have to push the boundaries and know exactly where those boundaries are. You definitely, in the race, don't want to get a drive-through or in qualifying invalidate what might be a fast lap. So very tricky to not only nail, but to get a maximum lap time out of the car. As we see Brenham maybe going just a little bit wide there than he would have wanted. So, as we see Gary there, the other thing I wanted to mention, we see some yellow and black curbs there. The curbs around here are pretty notorious as well. Easy to upset the car through some of those. So you want to make sure that your setup is dialed in for how bumpy these corners are. That left-hander right there is pretty notorious for being bad on those serrated curbs. So definitely just overall, in a word, tricky.
Agreed. There's a lot of seemingly unconventional turns. If we keep on with Gary Bosman here, going into what's going to be the turn 9-10 complex, lots of sort of just odd, you can see here, you're braking basically through turn 9 to make it onto turn 10. That complex turns 1, 2, and 3, very tricky, as well the 13-14 complex, where again, you're basically taking turn 13 flat just in time to immediately get on the brakes for turn 14. So lots of places to unsettle the car, but also lots of opportunities for our faster drivers to show why they are considered a fast driver. So definitely right now we can see Oystein Brenham at the top of the timing tables, almost 7/10 faster than the second place at the moment, Paul Krobs, who's had a little bit of an improvement over Carl Nordell. They've been swapping between second and third. So again, our fastest drivers are going to be able to show their stuff here, and as well, as you mentioned, with the track limits being pretty tight and tricky here, we're definitely going to be seeing our drivers having to skirt the edge and sort of battle with the limits as much as they are with their other drivers.
Absolutely, but with it being a tricky track, we might also see some drivers that are not always towards the top. Kurt Peters had a very, very solid result last time around in Suzuka. He currently sits in P4, not too far behind Carl Nordell, who Reagan was just talking about. A very nice lap time of a 34.5 for Kurt Peters, leads the silver class by over 2 seconds. So Kurt Peters, if he keeps performing this way, might be in conversation about a mid-season promotion. He has been absolutely blowing up these timesheets in his McLaren this time around. Also, Darren Chan, we can't see his time right now due to some issues with ACC TV, but P6 right now, leading the AM class. A very solid result for Darren, who was very quick around Suzuka as well, and who I owe an apology to. I was basically chastising him the whole stream for not having his wipers on, but it turns out he uses an external camera. He uses hood cam, very similar to me. I use roof cam, just for a little bit increased visibility, so he did not actually need to have his wipers on, as we see Kurt Peters going for a little drift there, a la Max Verstappen in F1 qualifying earlier this morning. But yeah, so Kurt Peters, Darren Chan, some very quick drivers right now. Magnus Hakuba, Yvonne Watson, a couple of drivers who are going to be hoping that in qualifying they can up the pace a little bit and keep ahead of those drivers to fight with their other pro compatriots.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, big differences we're seeing between, especially with Kurt Peters in that silver class, almost over 2 seconds faster than Gary Bosman, who was a fast driver in his own right. So big performance in this practice session by Kurt Peters. Now, of course, this is practice. We don't know if maybe Gary and Charlie and Marcus are sort of forgoing quality practice. Maybe they're just focusing on long runs. We really don't know. We'll, of course, be able to figure out with a little more certainty exactly how the pace is going to look in about 5 seconds here as free practice ends and we swap into the first qualifying session for the AM class. And Stephen, if I'm correct, I believe we are doing 10 minutes AMs, 10 minutes silver, 10 minutes for the pro drivers today, back to our normal schedule.
I believe so. I did not see anything earlier in the staff chat. So last time around at Suzuka, with how few silver drivers there were. It was combined AM and silver qualifying for the first 15 minutes, all pro drivers for the second 15 minutes of our 30-minute qualifying session. I do believe we're going back to our 10-10-10 format for each of our 3 classes, because we do have a pretty even split. We have 4 AM drivers, I count 4 silver drivers, and we have a pretty solid turnout from pro drivers, 7 pro drivers here today.
Excellent. We're getting asked in the chat to do a bit of a livery showcase before quali starts.
I think we can do that.
Yeah.
Let me just do the end of session. That didn't work the way I wanted it to.
Nope.
I need to fix my stream deck, it seems. But we will go ahead and hit drive there, and let me switch to a better camera. There is one that... Okay, this camera angle will be pretty solid. So we have here Yvonne Watson in his IBAC BMW M4, Charlie Thornton in his Zenith, kind of a trippy livery on his McLaren 720 Evo. Legre Simon, quite a few sponsors on there. He is rolling in the what am I looking for? The sponsorship dollars. I see Pepsi, I see Michelin, quite a few sponsors on that McLaren as well. Darren Chan showing off his Scuderia Ferrari livery, which we were not able to get before the race 2 weeks ago, but happy to have that downloaded and ready for today. That's a very nice looking livery. Hopefully he'll be able to bring in some of the pace that Carlos Sainz had earlier today. Gary Bosman, no main sponsors on this guy, but a nice simple livery for Gary. Oystein Brenham, similar situation. This almost gives me like old school Need for Speed vibes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like Need for Speed Most Wanted in like the 2005.
Yep, it just needs a little bit more silver, but that was exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, agreed.
Magnus Halkabuz, similar story. No main sponsors here, but a nice, almost camouflage-esque dark green and yellow livery on his McLaren. Marcus Ness, WMS. I'm not actually sure what that stands for. Any guesses from you, Reagan? Or maybe it's on below that door there. I think it's Walkenhorst Motorsport.
Well, you know what? Let me take a look here, because I know it can tell you. Where did it tell you? It should tell you his team. There's definitely a place that it'll tell me, and I don't know what it is right now.
While Reagan does a little investigating, we'll go to Paul Krabs in his very nicely shaded purple Ferrari 296. Bryce Prevost on track with that Miami Red Bull Racing livery, throwing it back to earlier this season in Formula One. But a Red Bull livery on a Ferrari, a little bit of a hot take potentially, but looks very good. Love the neon colors on there. Carl Nordell has an updated livery for this time around. He's going for a little bit of a blackout theme, some nice little dark gray and black swirls on that very nice looking Lamborghini. A new driver for today, Mircea Hatisi, a nice dark gray, almost a black base with some orange and blue highlights, reminiscent of the McLaren F1 car. I think that's a default livery in ACC that is provided, but still looks very nice. We have VNC Catalin with their Mercedes AMG F1 inspired livery on their AMG GT car for today, so looking very good there. Kurt Peters, who we were seeing quite a bit of in practice, a nice black base with some green highlights on his McLaren. And Jorge Esteban, I believe this was the same livery we saw for him last time around in Suzuka. A nice overall white Porsche 992 that he has going on right now. But we will go ahead and turn our autopilot back on. We are going to see who the fast drivers are right now as we are on board, or not really on board, but on camera with Bryce Prevost, currently P1 by 9/10 over Mircea Hatisi. A 37.0, a little bit off Bryce's pace of what he had back in practice. As I'm just seeing the chat, Charlie Thornton telling us that Marcus's livery is the Walkenhorst Motorsport livery. It's an in real life livery. So thank you so much for that insight, Charlie. Mircea with a little bit of a yellow flag, and they return to the garage. Legare Simon, I believe, might be in a similar position as Bryce is just finishing up their lap. Let's check in with Darren, who was pretty pacey in practice. Darren coming through the final hairpin, just one more corner to go. We'll see how he is faring on his lap. I think that's a track extension there. I don't think that lap time is going to be valid.
It looked like he may have just gotten over the line, and we can see as he crosses the finish line that, yes, that was an invalid lap, so he's going to have to go around one more time to see what he can do.
Absolutely. And while we're still on with Darren, we're going to change some things around. We're going to go personal best on the timing tower, and then personal best delta for the secondary info. So we can now see Darren is 0.3 up on his best, but Bryce Prevost still currently our class leader. Darren pretty closely following Bryce, so might be able to take some lessons, but at the same time, Darren was leading the AM class by over a second in practice, so Darren has some pretty solid pace in his own right. Don't think he needs to copy anyone else's lines except maybe some of the pro drivers.
Certainly. Now, of course, that being said, this is only a 10-minute qualifying session, which even for our pro drivers makes it difficult to get in a lap that you're happy with. So again, really, it is a shorter track, only 1:37 on the lap time, as we see. Bryce gets very close to the track limits, but keeps it inside, keeps it tight, looking very good there.
And Darren in the background went pretty
looks
wide.
Like he may have gone wide. And again, you only have a very limited number of opportunities to set a good lap in that 10 minutes. That looked close, but I believe that is good for Bryce. That seemed valid as he crosses the line. Doesn't have an improvement. Staying at 37.092.
I think that was invalid. I think it was invalid earlier, and that's why we weren't seeing like a time delta. But we do see one now, and I think that's yeah.
That does make a lot more sense. Again, maybe a robot would have been a little more insightful at that point. But yeah, I mean, 10 minutes really gives you, after an outlap, maybe 4 or 5 chances on a shorter track, which is not a lot of time, especially for our AM drivers who maybe have a little bit less consistency in their ability to put down that one lap. It's a tricky track as well, one that it's very easy to get wrong. You can see Bryce already half a second up, and he got that half second before he had even hit turn 1. So just getting a better exit out of the final turn on his to start his fast lap, turn 16. So lots and lots of room for errors, and I should say not a lot of room to get things wrong in that 10 minutes, because now we've got 2 minutes left before the silvers are out, and the AMs are going to be happy, or have to be happy with their times.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's a shorter lap around here, relatively. I mean, last time around in Suzuka, we did have slightly a longer qualifying, but if it were 10 minutes, or even thinking back to Zolder or Spa before that, 10 minutes where, the lap times, I mean, yeah, gonna cherry pick Spa as an example, 10 minutes with a 2 minute, like roughly 18, 19, 20 second lap time, you really only get, 3, 4, maybe 5 laps if you're really hustling the car the entire time, and can really line up your lap times well to cross the line right as time expires to get one more shot. At least around here, a little over a minute and a half. You might get 5 or 6 laps if you're lucky, but I mean, still, if you just go wide at one corner and invalidate your lap, that's 20% or slightly less of your opportunities out the window. So one little mistake can have a huge impact on your ability to get a lap in. As we see, Darren was about 3/10 up. He has now lost that, but he is still sitting on not having one solid lap time so far. So he really needs to capitalize on this. Maybe not push as hard as he would have wanted, but just be able to get in a solid lap so he's not starting at the back here, as he was slipstreaming Bryce Prevost there. Maybe a little bit of a Ferrari teamwork going on.
Well, he was trying. It's showing him as down 3/10. Now, of course, that is based on a lap time that doesn't really matter right now, that 3:26.812. So it's hard to say what he's actually going to come out as. Looked pretty clean there. We know he is fast from his times in practice. So only a little bit of time left to find out, as that is the end of our AM chimes. And he does go over and invalidate on the final turn. That is devastating for Darren and means he will not be setting a lap time. That is it for Darren Shan. We do still have Hatisi. Looks like he's 3/10 up, and he just finished his lap. It looks like an improvement to a 37.6, which means Bryce Prevost by almost 2 seconds is our AM pole sitter. So fantastic lap for Bryce, and for Darren, definitely one he's going to want to forget.
Yeah, not great, but at least he knows from practice he has the pace. He just needs to keep it clean in the race, and he should still be on for a solid finish. And I mean, even still, let's actually go back and change some of this information, since we won't have any deltas right now as our silvers are going out. Let's go back to car numbers so we can visualize the car classes as well. So Darren is going to be starting last in the AM class, but with only 3 drivers ahead of him. We know he has the pace. He'll just need to keep it clean and can potentially make his way up through the AM class drivers, especially since the silver and pro drivers are going to be moving up soon. It might be that Darren will still be starting just behind Legre Simon and Mercea and VNC Catalin, who we see sets a lap time, but they are a pro driver. Yes. I don't think they're supposed to be out on track right now.
Well, I see from Catalin, and this is in the actual in-game chat, he said, I am AM in the Google Docs, but pro on sim racing. And then first time racing here, and about 3 races completed on sim racing, simracing.gp he's referring to. Yvonne said, I think you're AM, you can go. So I believe that was the only lap time he had set, was that, yeah, he's supposed to be AM. Now, I don't know if he went out for the full 10 minutes, because he just set his lap at the end there, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe a bit of confusion about when he should be going out. It does seem a bit confusing, as we do have confirmation in the chat that he was misclassed and should be AM. So we'll have to remember that as we watch him going around. But regardless, yes, Catalin is an AM driver. Don't be confused by the pro classification. And at least based on his current quality time, he is 0.8 off of Prevost and second in class.
Yeah, so we'll see what ends up happening with Catalin. He may have just set that one lap and brought it back to the pits just to get something on the board. I assume that was an exception from the admins for their error. We have VGuard in the chat. Thanks for stopping by. We're bummed you couldn't be here today, but we know that life happens. We have a question. Can we get some bonus championship points if we guess the number of drive-thrus? I would say Probably not, but you would get quite a bit of commendation from Reagan and I. So if y'all in the chat want to guess how many drive-thrus there are going to be, we will keep track of that, and we'll see if there is a winner by the end of the race. Don't know what prize we can give you, but you will have some proud commentators. Maybe we can try and figure out how to give you like a special badge or something.
Yes, I like that. We can give him a badge.
Yeah, except I know from, what was it, the Zolder race where we were trying to figure out how to delete a spam comment. I don't know how good we are at at Twitch, so don't hold us to that if we can't figure out how to make that custom badge. That may be outside our skill set.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. That's going to be a difficult ask of us. Right now, we've got Kurt Peters has jumped into first place with a 35.195, a very nice time from him. Gary Bosman is currently at a 137.2, but he is second up on his time. Loses a little bit right now as we're on board with... who was that we're on board with?
Marcus Ness was on the camera, and he goes P3 with a 36.0, pretty solid. But Bryce Prevost still sitting in P2 as an AM, a very, very nice lap from him.
Yes, and with time to room to improve, as he's already half a second up on his previous lap. So Kurt Peters not playing around today. Definitely wants to establish himself as a top silver driver as he hits a 34.670 off the bat, while we've still got the rest of the AM sitting in the 36s.
And he didn't even set a personal best or a session best in that final sector. He was slower than he has been before through there, so maybe a little bit of time to find, as he was already flashing half a second up, but loses a little bit through turns 4 and 5, but 0.3 up, that's still a solid improvement. He might be, really knocking on the doors of some pro drivers at the start of the race.
Yeah, definitely. 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths up. He's looking like there's a possibility of a 133 on the board if he can keep it all together. Not quite there yet, but he's flashed a 6/10 gain. He's of course 0.67 away from that 33 barrier. But very fast right now. Another improvement after an already improved upon lap. So clearly showing a lot of pace here, as the rest of the silver drivers are not flashing anything to look at the moment. We're seeing all of them have set fast laps, and they're not quite ready to be improving, as it looks like Kurt maybe just got a little squirrely. He was up to 7 tenths, I think, at one point, but then might have just gone into the turn a little too hot and had to bleed off some time to keep it valid. So small improvement here. He's going to a 34.295, and with a lot of time to gain in that third sector. So fantastic driving from Kurt Peters, as we see Marcus Ness and Gary Bosman and the rest of the silver drivers trying to find a way to keep up.
Yeah, Kurt Peters exactly 1.5 seconds ahead of Bryce Prevost right now. So, yeah, Kurt Peters is a silver and Bryce Prevost is an AM. They are really rocking their classes today. No one else in their respective classes can really seem to keep up with them. We see Charlie Thornton had a yellow flag there. I know he had at least one spin, I believe, at turn 10 or 11 or something like that in practice that we saw a heli cam shot of. So not sure if that's exactly where he had a potential another spin, but 12 seconds off the pace. He definitely had some sort of incident somewhere. So drivers, as they're coming across the line, will have one or two more chances to get a lap time in. I think Kurt Peters will be around that same boat of just two more opportunities once he gets across the line in just a few corners time. Charlie is low on fuel, as I think Kurt invalidated there. Just took a little bit too much of that red striped. I don't even know what kind of surface it is. It's not AstroTurf or anything, but certainly not asphalt. But yeah, Charlie was low on fuel. Believe he has had to go back to the pits, as we see Gary Bosman flashing a little bit in the green. And yeah, Kurt Peters crossing the line, will have just one more opportunity to make it happen if he wants to get into the 33s.
Yes, we see Charlie Thornton has gone back to pits, so he had run out of fuel and didn't have a chance to set another lap. So that is qualifying done for Charlie. I see, let me just take a little peek here. We do have Marcus Ness out on track. Gary Bosman is out. Kurt Peters, of course, is out. Charlie Thornton is in the pits. So we do still have 3 of our silver drivers out there trying to set times. But right now we're seeing red from Bosman and Peters. And there is Ness, who is about even on his lap with 40 seconds to go before the end of silver qualifying.
Yeah, we have Gary Bosman, Marcus Ness very, very close to their best times. Kurt Peters losing a little bit on his final push lap. Charlie in the chat mentioning that he spun at turn 2 on his first push lap, invalidated at the end of his second lap, and then set his fastest time on the third lap, but ran out of fuel shortly thereafter. So only one opportunity for Charlie to get a lap in, and that goes back to what Reagan and I were talking about earlier. You really have only so few chances, and around here it is easy to make a mistake and lose those. As we see Gary Bosman improving 3 thousandths in front of Marcus Ness, as Marcus was unable to improve. He invalidated and returned to pit. So a last ditch effort for Gary. Huge implications. I mean, it's one position, but it's one position further up that you get to start. That's
exactly.
Yeah, very nice effort from Gary. Good job to hang in there and finish P2 in class.
And that's definitely one that is going to hurt for Marcus Ness, because he was up at least, I believe I saw 3/10, 4/10. He was on for a quite solid improvement before that invalidation. So that was a big swing for him, as he looks like, depending on if he had held that 4/10 gain, he might have even been able to pass Bryce Prevost for second. Mm-hmm. And that swings him all the way back to 4th place behind Gary Bosman with that improvement. So tough luck for Marcus Ness there. Still P4. Definitely not a spot to complain about as our pro drivers go out, but those are the kind of gains or losses that we won't really know the implications of what that means until after the race is over. But of course, any position matters, especially on MISANO, where there aren't a lot of super, what we'll call easy overtaking opportunities. It is not an easy track to overtake. There's a lot of tricky turns to create separation before the back straights, especially the front straight. You've got such a tricky section that is hard to sort of get close to the back of somebody on. And then as well for the back straight, you have that weird 9-10 hairpin thingy that you can kind of make a dive down there if you really want to, but again, you got to work for every place that you can find on this track. So yeah, definitely might not make a difference, but could. And that's really what matters here, is trying to set yourself up for the best opportunity to finish where you can, given the hand you're dealt.
Absolutely, and we are on right now with Carl Nordell. I believe he is leading all of the pros out of the garage and onto their first push laps. Carl, our first race winner apart from Oystein Brenham for the season, caused by Brenham's absence in the race at Suzuka. Brenham, of course, back today and was the only driver in practice to set a time in the 33s. So he is back with a vengeance today. Maybe a little peeved that Carl was able to steal a win away since he had to be gone. But yeah, Carl led a phenomenal race last time around. Just absolutely blew himself away from Magnus Alcaba and Richard Walters, finishing in the other podium places. So yeah, Carl, a phenomenal race, no mistakes, which is a huge change from Season 3, where I believe it was on lap 1, Carl lost control of his Mercedes and went into the wall early on, so not a good race, but much better this time around, as Brenham already up with a 34.287, just ahead of Kurt Peters. We're going to see what kind of lap time Carl does, and it is a 34-20, so
34-2.
takes P1 away from Brenham, but Brenham already improving. Magnus Hakuba also across the line, a 34-7, half a second back from our leaders, as well as Kurt Peters. Yvonne Watson and Paul Krob still yet to set a time. Jorge Esteban as well. But we are definitely going to see some improvements in the final 6 minutes of this qualifying.
Yes, definitely. We've got, as you mentioned, Paul Krobs and Jorge Esteban not yet setting a time. Paul Krobs on a fast lap. For what it's worth, it's showing in-game that he is 6/10 up, 7/10 up on a lap that doesn't necessarily exist. I believe it is a 36-1 that they're showing as his last lap. Of course, that lap didn't count, so always a bit tricky to understand exactly what the game is trying to tell us. But he's actually catching some traffic here, as we're seeing that is, I believe, Yvonne.
That is, yeah.
That is in front of him. Yvonne not necessarily on a fast lap. So this is a bit of a situation that we're getting here. Now, I believe Yvonne is on a valid lap. He is 4/10 down, and it does look like he is sort of starting to maybe improve a little bit through this third sector. But definitely going to be a bit of an annoyance for Paul, of course, if Yvonne is on a valid lap. Oh, he must have realized that he was just losing a bit too much time behind Yvonne there. Again, Yvonne well within his rights to continue his lap. It was a valid lap as far as I can tell. It was not a fast lap, but it was a valid lap.
And good for a 36-0.
And good for a 36-0. So, yeah, there's no need for Yvonne to back off there, even if Paul has a little bit more pace that is on Paul, of course, as he did, to back off and make his own space. So no harm, no foul on either drivers.
Nope, and while we were talking about Paul, Brenham did break into the 33s with a 33.56.
He didn't just break in. Ooh, he smashed into the 33s.
Smashed in and is still trending in the green, so could be on for another slight improvement on this lap. Paul not seeing the same kind of green sectors or green on the timing tower that we did last time around, so I wonder if it may have been a bad idea to back off at the end of that lap. Maybe he would have wanted to finish that lap and then back away from Yvonne to build that gap afterwards, because yeah, he is definitely not on the same trajectory, because last time around in the same part of the track he was showing 7, 8, 9 tenths improvement, and he is only matching that right now. So we will see, or I guess the lap that he set was valid, so he was essentially matching that time that he had. I was confused, apologies, and we are probably going to see a huge time improvement as he comes through here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds.
Huge improvements. Yeah, this should be a very nice lap for Paul.
It could be in the 33s or just above.
Let's see here. That is a 34.175, a very nice lap for Paul, surpassing Carl for second place.
Yeah, for a brief moment, he was showing a 3.7 second improvement, which would have put him into the 33s. He did lose a little bit in that final corner, set him up for a 3.4 second improvement, just about. But yeah, very, very nice P2 run for Paul Krobs. He has been very pacey this season, not always the best luck in the races, so hopefully starting in the front row potentially will clear him of any incidents at the start of the race. But yeah, very, very nice lap from Paul, as we see Yvonne showing some improvements and Carl Nordell as well.
Yes, it does look like Yvonne is finding a little bit extra pace there. Doesn't look like this is his fastest race. We've seen Yvonne with a lot of pace in Season 3 and Season 4. But here, just a little bit off with that 35.6. Does look like he's going to improve a bit. But it is, of course, a tricky track. So looks like Paul Krobs and Carl Nordell, Kurt Peters even, and Magnus just showing a little bit more pace at the moment. But, of course, you don't win the race in qualifying. You win the race in the race. So we'll see how well our drivers can set themselves up with these last couple laps. Only 2 minutes left in qualifying here. Carl and Paul showing green, but not big improvements here, though Carl doesn't need a big improvement to get in front of Paul Krobs. So looks like we'll just have to watch and see what these drivers are capable of. As we see, Paul has gone invalid and has returned to garage, so his race is done. Or his qualifying, I should say, is done. That is Paul Krobs, happy with a 34.110, and it's now up to Carl to see if he can beat that.
Yeah, and Marcus Ness, thank you for the follow. We really appreciate it. Reagan, I don't think you got to hear the classic groan noise that happens when we get a follow, but it was music to my ears. So thank you, Marcus. And I believe that is...
There is, just to say, that is Carl Nordell, who misses out on P2 by 0.017. That is a 34.127 for Carl. He does have another lap to go, but on that lap, at least, just barely misses out on a chance for P2. Now, he doesn't need much of an improvement at all at this point if he wants to surpass Paul, but it does mean that this lap needs to be clean.
Needs to be clean. This is his last opportunity. Same for Yvonne Watson, who is half a second up. That would potentially just put him in front of Kurt Peters, which would be nice for him to start in front of the silver drivers and only have pros ahead. Magnus Haukeba not looking like he is going to improve. Oystein Brenham was back out on track after going to the pits. He is back into the pits. No improvement there. As Reagan mentioned, Paul Krobs unable to improve, and Carl has lost any improvement that he had earlier this lap. He has not been able to keep it clean, as Reagan so kindly recommended, but he's finding a little bit here. He is just exactly matching now, improving by a couple of tenths. This is going to be an absolute...
He got squirrely there. Yeah, this is going to be close. It looked pretty set, but he got squirrely on the exit. It is showing 0.00. This could be down to the wire.
Ooh, it's a flip of a coin.
This is going to be tight.
Barely!
And he does it less than a tenth improvement, but he gets the 34.045 to take second place. Yvonne as well in the background, setting a 35.052. So he does improve, but not enough to move up in the positions. And that, my friends, is qualifying done. Oystein Brenham, P1, as everyone expected, and Carl Nordell just eking out Paul Krobs for that top front row position.
A very, very nice lap for Carl. Was worried a little bit there in the middle of the lap that he had lost it, but that final sector is where he had lost some time on the previous lap. Nailed it just to get in front of Paul Krobs, but enough to solidify P2 overall. But man, half a second back to Oystein Brenham in P1. I don't think anything will stop Brenham from winning this race unless there is some sort of incident for him going on during the race.
He has been very clean, and it's something we don't talk about enough. He is very good at maneuvering the first laps of a race. Not once, I believe, have we seen him get crashed out by another driver. Have we seen him make a mistake that pushes him back into positions? We've seen him lose positions, losing one or two positions occasionally, but he is always keeping himself in the race, keeping himself in the hunt, and then, of course, almost inevitably finding a way to get to the front of the grid. So obviously starting at the front makes it a lot easier to avoid some of the contact and chaos, but still doesn't make you completely insusceptible to it. So of course the race start is going to be coming up in 5 minutes or so. We've got lots of drivers hungry to make up positions, and we'll just have to see what happens.
And speaking of hunger, what I'm hungry for is learning a little bit more about this track. Reagan, do you want to lead our classic track walk and track overviews?
I would love to, Stephen. And of course, as an Italian track, it is time for me to pull out my obnoxious Italian accent. Please don't be offended. I promise I am doing this with nothing but the most of respect for my Italian friends.
Wonderful. We will go ahead and start with our track walk.
Hey, it's MISANO here. We got to the pizza and we got to the MISANO track walk. Okay, that was a bit. You know what? I agree. I'm sorry to my Italian friends. We're coming up on turn one. This is a Variante del Parco, turn 1, 2, 3 complex here. All named together. Not a lot of names for the turns here at MISANO. They don't seem to care as much. We've got Curva del Rio there, turn 4, before 5 and 6. Very tricky section. Technically turn 7 in that little kink there on the straight. Technically a turn before we hit Curva Carica, maybe. We'll see. Before Curva Tramonto, another weird 9-10 section where you're basically braking across a turn, hitting sector 3, going to Curvone, full flat out turn before we get into finally a very tricky section here, the 12 to 15 complex, Curva del Caro, something like that. I'm sure one of those might have been correct. Before hitting turn 16, Curva MISANO, named after MISANO, and that is the track walk for MISANO.
Reagan, something I thought was interesting. Caro in Italian most closely means like a wagon or something, but it can also mean car. So that is essentially car curve or car corner.
Curve. Well, there are a lot of cars that go around that corner, so it's not necessarily inaccurate.
And Curva MISANO, one of my favorites. I, of course, love at other tracks Silverstone Curve. I love Spa-Francorchamps Curve. And, of course, MISANO Curve here, continuing that trend. I love when a curve at a track is named after the track itself. That's very not confusing at all.
Not at all. Yes, we all love Silverstone Curve. yes. Our favorites in the track.
Yep, there's a Brands Hatch Curve as well. Suzuka Curve 2 weeks ago we saw. But anywho, I'll stop making jokes. Let's go to our overview.
Yeah, this is a serious stream, Steven, for serious people. So I don't know what the hell you're thinking. Coming up with jokes out here. We got MISANO. Once again, it's a MISANO. As our fake drivers here come on to a very real fake track. Fake digital track here. Going into turn 1, and turn 1 is it's an overtaking opportunity, but it's a very tricky track. As of course you're going over to the right, and then immediately back to the left, and then immediately back to the right for Variante del Parco. I guess turn 3 is technically what they call the turn. Into the heavy braking zone for turn 4, Rio. Another one. I mean, these turns are just weird. Like, this is a weird track. A very fun track, but a weird track. Before turn 6, we're heading onto the back straight, and technically, we were about to hit a turn. Look at this driver completely missing the apex. That was horrible. Before hitting Curva Corsia. Yeah, sure. You see a good overtaking opportunity, possibly the best on the track. Definitely a lot of space to show your moves and to get the inside line or to go around the outside. Lots of space, which this track doesn't always afford you. Going into Tramonto, again, it is an overtaking opportunity, but because you're cutting turn 9 to get the best line through turn 10, it is a tricky spot to overtake, as is almost all of the spots on this track. We've got the flat Curvone. I think it's just Curvone, to be honest with you. Before turn 12, which is also flat before the heavy braking for turn 13, and then another braking zone for turn 14. That is Caro Curva Caro. Turn 15 here, we can see the AI driver going on the inside. I don't know if that is the best idea. As you can see, that driver lost a lot of time. Not an overtaking opportunity before Curva MISANO, which you could maybe try to overtake through. We didn't list it as an overtaking opportunity, and I think that's the right call. And that, of course, once again, is MISANO.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Reagan.
You're very welcome.
I think something I did last week, because you might have seen it right at the end. I tried to do the pole lap replay, but because the session changed from qualifying to race, while I was in that replay, it kicked me out of it. So we went through a couple corners on that pole lap on board before it kicked me out. So then I just did a overview of the qualifying order, which I thought was fun. So we'll go ahead and repeat that. In P1, we've already said it many times, Oystein Brenham getting a solid pole position, followed by Carl Nordell, who in a last gasp effort was able to get in front of Paul Krabs in the purple Mercedes. Kurt Peters leading the silver class by some margin in his McLaren in P4 overall. Magnus Hakaba not able to do anything to get in front of Kurt Peters, and neither was Yvonne Watson. But they were able to get in front of Bryce Prevost, our top-rated AM driver. A stunning lap by Bryce puts him P7 overall in front of Gary Bosman, silver driver, and Marcus Ness. Charlie Thornton, who we saw in chat, was only able to get in one actual lap, a couple of spins or off tracks before running out of fuel, hampered his qualifying effort. VNC Catalin only able to get in one lap due to an admin error and a little bit of confusion, but their first race in Bez should be hopefully a little less chaotic than qualifying, and a first race also for Mircea Hatisi in that very nicely colored McLaren. Legre Simon, who had their first race with us at Suzuka, a couple of issues there, but looking forward to hopefully an easier race for them at this dry Misano track. Darren Chan, very pacey in practice, not able to get in a lap in qualifying, unfortunately, but has the pace. And Jorge Esteban, who we didn't really mention in qualifying, a pro driver who did not set a time, so he is starting all the way from the back. We will have to see what Jorge is able to do today.
Well, I'm a little confused about that because he is showing his P12, and I don't remember what the time was, but I believe I saw that he had a time in qualifying. Unfortunately, at least in my instance of ACC, I can't return to garage until the slow lap is done, the formation lap. But I believe Esteban is in P12. I believe he set a time. It was not a particularly good time, and he has fallen all the way back. He is well away from the rest of the grid at the moment. Not sure why he has gone so far back.
Yeah, we see on the position deltas, he is down 3 places, so you're right, he should be P12. I know he had a couple of incidents at Suzuka. We haven't had any stewards reports, but he might be kind of self-serving a quali ban.
That would make sense, because, he is very clearly sitting far back. But we don't have time to talk about that, as we've got the green light, and that is Oystein Brenham and the rest of them off into turn 1, and things look clean for Oystein Brenham to get... Oh no, Oystein, of course, that is Carl Nordell on the inside there. Carl Nordell currently in P1. He is overtaken as we have an incident in the back, and that is Marcus Ness showing in P14. He is one of our drivers who is up in the top half of the grid. Here we've got a very side-by-side fight between Brenham and Carl, as we've got now Yvonne and Magnus are showing yellow. They haven't dropped back yet, but we've got drivers all around the grid who are just all over the place. And as well, Marcus Ness with a drive-through penalty.
Oh? Starting out of position?
Must have started out of position.
Very interesting.
Lots to keep up with, lots to pay attention to, but for now, what's important is that we have Kurt Peters in P3 fighting with Oystein Brenham, only 3 tenths back. What a start for Kurt, as he has taken advantage of some awkwardness. We've got Charlie Thornton and Marcus Ness at the back. They're not going to be happy about that. Lots to see, but at the moment, what is most important is, of course, this top fights, as we have Yvonne up to P4, Paul Krabs in P5, and right on the back of Yvonne. So lots going on there, just on the right side of the screen. Lots going on all around this grid.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier, or I think I did. Paul Krabs' terrible luck. He did start P3. We saw going on the back straight after turn 6, I believe it was. He went a little deep into turn 7, went off track and lost that spot to Yvonne Watson, and now sits P5. And Kurt Peters also was able to get by. So yeah, Carl Nordell, excellent start, swept around Oystein going into T1. A close battle through 4, 5, and 6 for those two drivers, but Carl still leads. Oystein close behind. Kurt Peters falling behind just a little bit. But yeah, Paul Krabs, I feel for him. We might try and go back to some of those incidents from lap 1 because we see Legere Simon in the pits, Marcus Ness and Charlie Thornton very out of position. They've lost 5 and 3 spots respectively. And Darren Chan up 4 places, 5 places now from where he started. So Darren having a very nice start.
Yeah, he seems to be having a fight here with Catalan. They've kind of been swapping back and forth. Really good fight between the two of them. We can maybe even switch over to as they're close side by side at the moment. So this fight is not done, as I believe that is Catalan just right on the back now. Darren may have set that position yet, but Catalan is coming back at him, just closing in slowly but surely with that draft. So yeah, interesting fights all across the grid. That's Darren going just a little bit defensive there and able to hold station and catching up even to Gary Bosman. So very nice start there from Darren, taking advantage of some drivers' misfortunes and getting a spot off of Catalan.
And we see fastest lap for Carl Nordell, a 35.1. Yeah, Darren right on the rear end of Gary Bosman now goes to the inside.
Oh, he really wants the inside. And I mean, wow, Gary did leave the door open. There was enough room. He didn't have to go on the grass. And that is Darren Chan going around the outside of Gary Bosman, getting a little racy today.
Yeah, very nice, very tentative through there. He really backed off after T1 and into T2. And Catalan tried to go up the inside of Gary. Gary does the switchback. So yeah, now Gary holding up Catalan, and that just launches Darren into a over 1 second lead now. So Darren is going to be happy with that. Bryce Prevost next in his sights.
Yeah, fantastic driving from Darren, and then a bit of luck as Catalan and Bosman get fighting, which allows Darren to make a bit of a gap. So he's got some breathing room now after a very nice start. Up to P9, and as you said, with Bryce in his sights as we swap over to Paul Krabs.
Now, Paul Krabs just 2 tenths behind Yvonne Watson. We know Paul was quite a bit faster than Yvonne in qualifying, has some pace in that purple Ferrari, just needs to find a way by. That is not going to be the way to get by if
you're not
they
allowed
make
to go
contact.
through. And he did notice and make note of that, which is why he is backed off, as we've got Catalan now.
Yeah, let's
wonder what happened there.
Let's take a replay on this. So we see, Catalan did get around Gary Bosman in the hunt of Darren Chan down one of the longer straights. The first right-hand bend, then coming up to the second one in just a little bit. On the brakes, loses the rear end a little bit. And a good half spin for good measure. So that is going to be a lot of progress lost for Vancy Catalan as Jorge Esteban is able to get by after that as well. So not what Catalan would have wanted, as Kurt Peters sets the fastest lap.
Of the race, Kurt. What a race! We've only got, I think, 3 viewers right now. Let's hope the fan club decides to show up at some point.
And we want to check this out. Paul Krabs, we were talking earlier, was on the rear end of Yvonne Watson, who I think he is sick and tired of seeing that rear end after being right behind it and impeded slightly in qualifying. Paul was right on the rear end, but then was ultimately fighting with Magnus Hakuba. So yeah, Paul did not get a good corner there. Magnus takes a much more preferred line, and they were fighting into T7 or 8, I believe it is, and a little contact for
just
good measure.
A little contact, but it keeps stay both on track, and yeah, Magnus able to take advantage of Paul just getting a little too close to Yvonne and not getting a good exit. So good driving and good heads up awareness from Magnus to take advantage of the situation there.
Yep, and Paul now falling just a little bit behind. He might be just getting a little frustrated with himself for losing now 3 places in this race. And now Magnus looking to fight with Yvonne a little bit. As, Paul on the brakes, it looked like just closed that gap so significantly. It looks like he's being able to brake quite a bit later in that Ferrari compared to the cars ahead. And that seems to be where he is able to make up a decent chunk of time compared to as Magnus gets a little sniff on that BMW rear end. That is a little more than Smith. As it did get registered as contact for Yvonne. So that is some very close racing. Nothing separating that BMW and that McLaren.
And why don't we take a swap over?
Oh, there was a hit. Yvonne spins and Paul.
Oh, Yvonne spins and Paul. Wow.
Paul capitalizes. Wow. So let's definitely get a replay on that.
We'll need to keep an eye because I don't think, Brenham is consistently on the back of Nordell, but there is nothing that demands attention at the moment, and I think this will demand a little bit more of our attention here as we see Magnus going down on the back straight. Gets a little squirrely on the brakes, gets a little aggressive, doesn't have room, and bangs into the back of Yvonne, allowing Paul Krabs to get through and into some clean air.
Wow, how fortuitous for Paul. He just had to wait a little bit, being patient, and now has an almost 3-second gap in front of Magnus. He is going to be very happy about that.
Yes, he definitely will be as well. I'm pretty sure we just saw Darren Chan get past Bryce Prevost. We might need a replay of that because that is Darren just having a phenomenal start to his race from the AM class. We see here Darren in that beautiful Ferrari.
It looks like Bryce got a little squirrely before the final hairpin. Has to take the outside line. Darren goes up the inside. Bryce, a pretty good exit on the outside there, but Darren squeezes him to the inside. Close, but no contact. And that is, Darren, pretty good racecraft there. Very, very nice from Darren. And from the start of this race, it took him, 5 laps to go from last place in AM to he is now leading that class, I believe. Let's take away the position delta and go back to our car numbers. No, it's Mircea Hatisi is leading the AM class, but guess who is right behind Mircea? It's Darren Chan. So Darren very close. Well, goes a little wide there. That's not going to help him, but Darren, knocking on P1 in the AM class.
Yeah, Darren, of course, he is an AM driver. Mistakes are going to happen for everyone. We've seen mistakes from pros. We've seen mistakes from silvers. And Darren there going a little bit deep, but still showing a ton of pace and a little bit of racecraft, aggressive but fair, as he is up to P8.
Yeah, and you were mentioning before the battle between Carl and Oystein Brenham. Oystein stalking Carl as now Paul Krabs takes the fastest lap, a 34.4, very close to what they were doing in qualifying, and we're only 10 minutes into the race. So Paul absolutely flying. He wants to get his P3 back. He is hunting down Kurt Peters, who is staying very, very close to our leaders. Kurt Peters, very, very solid race. I think it was Jorge in the chat earlier mentioning that Kurt needed another promotion from AM to Silver for this season to Pro mid-season. I think he is definitely demonstrating that he has the pace and the racecraft to be right up there with our leaders. He is absolutely fighting with them. So excellent for Kurt, just stalking P1 and P2 at the moment. Maybe hoping that they will have some sort of clash and he could potentially capitalize on a P1. But Brenham is just glued to the back of Carl's car. Hopefully we won't see anything like what happened between Yvonne and Magnus, where there's a little tap which causes that pass. But we've seen some very close racing between these two drivers many times throughout the last 2 seasons, as Brenham does get a little loosey-goosey through that second to last corner. Costs him just about a 10th or 2. But this is going to be a good battle between these two very talented drivers.
Certainly will be. Yes, we see. It's always nice to watch these two drivers fight. Both very clean, both very cognizant of the positioning of the other cars around them. So we haven't yet, I believe, in the 2 seasons that we've had Brenham around, seen any clash between these two drivers. Maybe there's been a bump I'm forgetting. Certainly nothing major. So it's always fun to watch these two fight. We've seen this position before with Brenham hunting down Carl, and Carl's usually able to keep his cool for a while, but of course, it's a long race to keep somebody who's got just a little bit more pace than you behind, and we're just going to have to see how Carl keeps his cool this time.
And we're on a replay with Marcus Ness right now, who goes wide and loses the car on traction. So Marcus definitely not having the race he would have wanted. We still need to go back at some point to see what happened on lap 1. There were a good few incidents there that Marcus was involved in. So in last place, now even a little bit further into last. We saw before VNC Catalin got past Jorge Esteban, and Jorge now flashing white, so going a little slow, not sure what for, but we will go back to our closest battle between Øystein Brenham and Carl Nordell.
His battle is staying pretty consistent. It doesn't look like Carl has made a mistake large enough to allow Brenham a real overtaking opportunity. Staying pretty clean. I mean, there's times where you can see Brenham gets a little bit of a better turn, like there. He made a bit of an improvement, but not yet enough to allow for an actual overtake chance. Now, of course, the thing is, it's always hard to know or to recognize when an overtake is coming until it actually happens. So right now, Carl is going to have to be paying a lot of attention to his rearview mirrors, just making sure that he is keeping himself in the right position. Hasn't had to do a lot of defending yet, but he does need to be cognizant of where Brenham is on track, as we see a replay of Catalin just getting a little bit too much speed there, similar to what, I can't remember who the driver was. It
was Catalin. That almost looked like a replay from earlier. It was the same corner, same thing. It's just losing the rear. So I don't know if Catalin, before when Catalin was chasing down Darren, it looked like they were catching up quite a bit on the straights. I think Catalin is just running maybe a little too low of downforce needed for those high-speed corners to keep that rear end planted.
Yeah, it does look like things just get a little squirrely there. I mean, it's a tough turn because you can see it looks like he starts to turn under braking, and that's kind of what's breaking that traction. And it's a turn that it's very easy to do that. One thing we haven't mentioned is Darren Chan.
I was just looking at that.
Up in P7. He is a second behind Yvonne Watson.
And 3 ahead of Mercea, who was leading the AM class before. So we missed that overtake from Darren, but yeah, he is just flying away from the other AM drivers and is now knocking on the door of a pro driver.
That is very impressive. I mean, we saw it looks like he just briefly lost a couple tenths with maybe a bit of a mistake, but otherwise, yeah, Darren just showing a lot of pace here, showing some racecraft, no mistakes yet, other than a couple small ones that haven't affected his race. So yeah, really good stuff from him, and of course, really good stuff from Kurt Peters. Only 2.7 seconds back of this fight for the lead.
Yeah, so we saw before Kurt was hanging around between 1.5 seconds and 2 seconds, falling back just a little bit. May have been pushing those tires a little too hard in these first 15 or 16 minutes, keeping up with P1 and P2. I wonder if that is going to allow Paul Krobs, who still has the fastest lap of the race, to catch up and help him reclaim his P3 starting position. But yeah, still a phenomenal effort from Kurt. As we see Øystein sniffing up the inside.
Yeah, Øystein had to brake there because he had some speed. He had some speed on Carl Nordell, but not so much that he could get his nose in. So he actually had to tap the brakes to just release the throttle just a touch there to keep himself back. It's certainly an art form that isn't always talked about with overtaking, is making sure you can get the pass done at the right time. Because yes, Brenham had a little bit more speed and could have theoretically gotten beside Carl Nordell there, but there needs to be enough space for you to actually do something about it. And Carl, of course, made sure that there was not enough space. So timing your runs is something that Brenham, I'm sure, is well aware of, and why he was confident in his in backing off there, knowing he'll get another shot later on. But yeah, certainly part of the art of overtaking.
Absolutely, and I just realized we are still stuck on the at the bottom, the timing data. I have their fastest lap. Let's go back to last lap for Oystein Brenham. So a 34.945 for Brenham that last time around. It's going to be very close for Carl, a 35.1. So Oystein was definitely closing the gap on that lap. Yeah, Sector 2, including those fast right-handers where we saw Oystein have to brake a little bit, was quite a bit faster than Carl that time around, and they are now catching up to lap traffic. I believe that is I was gonna say Marcus. Ness. It almost looked like the silver of that's definitely Marcus Ness. I thought it looked like the silver of Catalin in their Mercedes, but that is definitely Marcus.
Yes, Marcus, of course, has a drive-through from starting the race out of position, which is pushing him back as he's getting out of the way now for our leaders, allowing them to continue their race. So an unfortunate start for Marcus, having to deal with lap traffic this early, especially given his pace is certainly not one that would necessarily indicate he would need to be part of lap traffic this early. But bad start for him, and he's unfortunately dealing with the consequences of that now.
And speaking of silver drivers, something I was going to mention before, I mean, we know Kurt Peters is up in P3, losing a little bit of time still to Carl and Brenham, but, I mean, the next closest silver driver is, almost 30 seconds behind? Wow. Like 5, 4, 21. Yeah, like over 30 seconds, I think, back from Kurt to Gary Bosman. So Kurt, even if he could spin or almost take an extra pit stop at the moment and still come out in front of all his fellow silver drivers. He is having the race of his silver career right now.
Yeah, excellent race for Kurt Peters at the moment of a potentially short-lived silver career, as we've already seen drivers and admins talking about bringing up the idea of him switching over to the pro class. Of course, that is not for us to decide. We can only watch and throw some praise on Kurt, and of course as well on Darren, who is now within a second of Yvonne as we swap over to a replay here.
Yeah, so we saw Catalin get a little close to Jorge Esteban. Charlie was able to sneak on the inside for just a moment. Got a little spooked by Catalin still there on the inside, had to go wide, and Catalin did retain that position. So everything stationary. Thornton almost got the move on Catalin because of that braking error, but nothing doing there still. But yeah, Darren Chan now 0.3 behind Yvonne Watson. I mean, this is we're gonna come over here. This is a battle, but an unexpected battle, I would have said, going into this race. But yeah, Darren, certainly. I think, knocking all of our socks off with his race pace. And the last time we checked in, he had like a less than 3 second gap, I think, to Mircea Hatisi. That's now 8.5 seconds. Darren, man, where did this come from?
Yeah, he has shown some unexpected pace, and this is certainly a pleasant surprise for us and for the viewers. A less pleasant surprise for Yvonne, who now has to contend with fighting with an AM driver. Yvonne just a little bit off of his normal pace in qualifying, and it seems to be showing here. Just not quite able to battle with the other pro drivers at this track. Maybe just didn't have enough time to practice. Maybe didn't have enough time to dial in the setup. Whatever the reason, he is now having to contend with Darren, who's right on his heels.
Right on his heels, indeed. So we have this battle for P6 and P7. Brenham still less than half a second behind Carl Nordell. These are our our closest battles at the moment. We've mentioned Paul Krabs before. The last time we mentioned him, he was about 4.5 seconds behind Kurt Peters. That gap is still around 4 seconds. So Paul, I think maybe when he was trying to set his fastest lap and catch up may have hurt his tires as well, because he has not been able to put that much of a dent into the gap between himself and Peters. So Peters is falling back from Carl and Brenham in P1 and P2, but it seems like Paul is falling back at about the same rate, considering that gap between himself and Kurt is staying pretty steady at the moment.
Yeah, it looks like it. Paul able to get past or work his way back to P4 after a bit of a rough start, but yeah, it looks like that gain has stalled as we now see a drive-through penalty for Darren Chan.
No!
Darren has just popped up with a drive-through penalty for track limits, so he has been pushing like hell to try to get through these positions, and it looks like the pushing has not paid off. He's now going to have to go in for a drive-through. That is really sad to see here, as he has been driving like hell to get himself up to P7 and even fighting with the pro drivers.
And our only prediction for number of drive-thrus was 5 for the entire race. I thought that was pretty high, but considering that we did get a drive-through for Marcus Ness for starting out of position, that is 2 out of 5 so far. We replied in the chat. Unfortunately, on screen it doesn't show what message we replied to, but it was the message of the estimate being 5 drive-thrus, as we see Darren in for his drive-through. Darren, don't speed in. Very nice
Very
entry.
good.
Just has to get through this. At least it's not Spa where he got the drive-through.
Yes, he's definitely losing. It looks like 1, 2, 3 places, possibly more. We're just going to have to see, as we've got the 911 of Jorge Esteban is just coming through turn 16, and Darren has stopped. Darren has stopped in the pits. Why did he stop? Darren, buddy. Maybe he wants to do his pit stop early. Maybe he's thinking, why not? As we swap over to Oystein Brenham. I will keep an eye on that situation. But yeah, he is still stationary at the moment. And see here, Oystein making the move, or at least trying it. He is getting racy, and we will see if that move pays off. We've got Carl Nordell on the inside there. Oystein Brenham not quite able to make the move, but he doesn't want to back down. He is right on the back of Brenham. What a fight we are witnessing here once again between these two drivers.
Yeah, it was almost a little bit of bump drafting on that pit straight, and Brenham basically does what Carl did to him on lap 1, goes around the outside, but Carl able to hang it through turns 2 and 3.
Wow.
Keeps the lead. What a battle. And that does allow Kurt Peters to catch up ever so slightly. I'm sure he'll be saying, yes, please keep on battling. I want to pick up the pieces from what you guys left behind. But man, that was a very solid effort multiple times by Oystein Brenham. He is saying, 25 minutes into this race, I want to get back into P1. I'm tired of looking at your rear end, Carl.
Yes. One thing to note, we do have another drive-through of Bryce Prevost who's going into the pits.
Oh, no.
As we've got, Brenham, it looks like maybe he's done with sitting in second place. He's getting a little more racy, a little more aggressive. Maybe he's been saving his tires for a chance at a move later in the stint. As he's now backed off, it looks like maybe he went a bit deep there on turn 10. He needs to recharge, get back into the slipstream, and he will be doing just that. As now we have Carl trying to get past a lapped traffic, and he is really being held up at the moment, and that is allowing Brenham right back into this fight.
Yeah, I think Carl's going to dive it up the inside. Brenham also doing the same. Ultimately, not too bad. And Darren, okay, so we see Darren going to the pit lane. I think Darren may have done his pit stop first and is now serving his drive-through. I wonder if he thought he could do both at the same time?
Or maybe he just wanted to get them out of the way.
Yeah.
Tough to say. I mean, it's certainly a decision. Is Brenham once again is getting a little more feisty. And yeah, he has to back off, which, as you mentioned, a rare mistake there that we'll take a look at. Brenham
Good decision, but is now 1.5 seconds back. This is by far the biggest gap we have seen, as Gary Bosman under a yellow flag and stopped. That's not what you want to see. So
he stopped on track. Let's see a replay here.
Gary, what is going on?
Going through turn 1. Everything looks nice and dandy there. Turn 2 looks okay. Nothing weird yet. As he just...
Strange. What a weird place to lose it.
Yeah, that is very strange.
And I think then his car probably stalled out and he had to... Oh, we come back and see him. He's losing it again.
What is happening? Oh. Tires might just be gone. Maybe the setup was not dialed in. That is tricky stuff for him, and that is not what you want to see. Maybe we can swap over to Charlie Thornton quickly, as he looks like he might be getting racy with Jorge Esteban, one of the pros. Right on the back here of Jorge Esteban. Jorge, as you mentioned, starting from the back after setting one qualifying lap, a tentative qualifying lap. And he's at a quiet race, but here he is under pressure from an AM driver. Did Darren do... Oh, Darren is currently doing his drive-through. Okay. What are we looking at here, Stephen? Enthralling replay we're seeing of Darren going down the pit lane.
Oh, I had muted my mic. I was trying to explain, and you kept on asking, what are we looking at? And I was like, man, I'm telling you, why do you keep talking over me?
What? And that thank you for that replay, Stephen. That was phenomenal.
Well, no, okay, so the intention there was I wanted to go back. I thought it would go back far enough to see if he was stationary or not, because that was potentially his third time through the pit lane, because the last time we mentioned he was going in, that was like a lap or two ago.
Strange.
So if that was still his drive-through, it was one of the longest drive-throughs I think I've ever seen. So I just I was curious to see if we could get some additional insight. Unfortunately, we did not. But yeah, just very unfortunate, I think, overall for Darren Chan, who was at one point building a massive gap over the rest of the AM class, as we see Charlie Thornton, next person in the pits, maybe trying to undercut Jorge Esteban a little bit.
Very possibly for him. He was getting real racy and had to back out of a couple moves that we didn't see on camera. And it looks like maybe he's just trying to make a move in clean air. We have Catalan, Chan, and Ness. Those are three drivers who have completed their pit stops. And now we will have a fourth shortly with Charlie Thornton.
Charlie Thornton in, Gary Bosman in as well. Oystein Brenham has been able to start closing the gap to Carl Nordell. We will revisit this battle. That's the gap as it was. So yeah, we don't see the BMW right on the rear end of that Lamborghini anymore. But after Brenham had his mistake a few laps ago going into the exact corner that they are approaching now, that gap was up to a second and a half. now back down to just about a second or just below that. So Burnham definitely has the pace. He is able to close that gap once again. But Kurt Peters as well is still, he was able to catch up a little bit when they were having their own battle a few laps ago. Kurt Peters is still less than 3 seconds behind. As we see, Jorge Esteban, I think, is yellow because he was leaving the pits. No, he was not.
He was not leaving the pits. That is
I was getting him messed up with Charlie Thornton, so I wonder if this is going to be shades of Catalin, who we have seen lose it on these right-handers coming up here. Under pressure from Darren Chan, potentially, and
loses it himself. I mean, that looked very close, but no, that was Jorge just getting a bit squirrely and overcorrects, and there he goes.
Yeah, very interesting. And he is in the pit, so I think just those tires might be calling it quits. But if it is, a little over 30 minutes into the race and there's 43 minutes left, if his tires are already going, he is not going to be happy in about 30 minutes' time when his tires are in the same state and he still has 13 minutes to go after that.
Certainly may need to reduce that or increase that brake bias a little bit if things are getting a bit squirrely for him, especially in that Porsche.
Yeah, traction control as well could be good.
Could be good. Lots of choices to make, but of course Jorge is the one who has to make them.
And let's check out Charlie Thornton, who is coming around. He is going to be wanting to get in front of Jorge Esteban, trying that undercut. We are seeing Charlie on the heli cam. Where is Jorge?
I believe
we do
Jorge
not see
is
him
out
yet.
on track at the moment. He's not showing in the pits, so I believe that is just a clean.
Yeah,
clean
quite a bit of ways
for Jorge. Yeah,
and they had similar. Or no, I was looking at a different driver. So Charlie, I think, did take tires. Jorge didn't take tires. He had a 10-second pit stop. He only took
Jorge
fuel.
didn't take tires?
No.
After that spin?
Nope. He was only stationary for 10 seconds, and Charlie was stationary for 30.
We've got as well. I believe that was Gary Bosman is now
Yep.
showing yellow. We'll have to swap over, see what happened to him. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that decision by Jorge, but you know what? It's not my car, not my driving. So all the power to him.
I mean, maybe the tires felt fine, and he just spun because the car was light on fuel. I know that can make the Porsche's rear end a little bit unstable. As Gary just a lazy
That's
spin
a weird
there.
one. Yeah,
it was a couple laps ago we saw him going around too, right?
it was a while ago, but yeah, he had a half spin earlier on in the race.
Yeah, very strange.
Not a race to remember for Gary Bosman, as we have a couple other drivers in the pits here, TC and Simon.
That relegates Jorge up one place and probably another very soon. We have Kurt Peters is still closing in slightly. The gap down from 2.7 to 2.5. Well, goes right back up to 2.7 right as I say it. But yeah, Wasting getting very close once again to the rear end of that Lamborghini of Carl Nordell. And apart from that, gaps are pretty big, but we are in the pit stop cycle, so folks that were battling earlier might not be showing battles right now, but once everyone does their pit stop, we will see what battles are currently existing. But yeah, Charlie losing quite a bit of time to Jorge Esteban, even though Jorge had that spin, because Charlie did take fuel and tires on his pit stop. We'll have to see if that gamble pays off in the remaining 40 minutes of this race.
Certainly will, yes. We see Burnham there getting real close. Nose just sniffing a opportunity.
And Brenham in.
And Brenham goes in trying to get the undercut. You could see that he tried to hide his intentions for as long as possible. And now it is all on Carl Nordell. He's going to have one free lap, and then we're going to have to see if he decides to go into the pits just to cut off any undercut opportunities for Brenham, or if he is going to try an alternative strategy. So interesting lap we have here for Carl Nordell and for the lead of this race.
Yeah, most definitely. So, as Reagan mentioned, be interested to see if Carl comes in this lap or if he still has the fuel to keep on going. I highly doubt that Brenham took tires. He is already coming out, so in just a second or two, we should see his stationary time. He was in there a little bit longer than other people. Other people had stationary times of like 41 or 42, or sorry, not stationary, but total pit lane times of 41 or 42 seconds. Brenham is already a decent amount above that, so Brenham might have taken tires. Is he still stationary?
He's not stationary
He's coming out
anymore.
now.
He is moving. But how much time he took, it is an interesting question. We'll have
Given
to
his
see.
time, he was stationary for 34 and a half seconds. He took tires.
He did take tires. We do have Carl Nordell now coming towards the pit lane. Let's see what his decision is. And he is going into the pits. He is mirroring, Brenham to prevent any chance at an undercut. Now, whether Carl tries to take advantage of the tire difference and tries to save 20 seconds, that will be a very, very interesting question. Certainly one that we will be paying attention to here as we see him stationary and the timer starts.
Yep, I have a timer on my phone going. As soon as he stopped, I hit start. I'm curious to see what this is before the game even tells us. Currently stationary for just about 15 seconds. If he was taking fuel only, I think he would have been out the door already because we saw Jorge stationary for about 8 or 9 seconds for fuel only. So I think Carl is indeed taking tires. And we are coming up on 30 seconds, and
so we've
he's
got
still
Brenham
there.
Oh, okay. Here is Carl going. Brenham is at turn 15 at the moment, and coming up onto the final turn. He is now at turn 16. He was about, half a second behind Carl when he went into the pits, and we see Carl still going down the pit lane. This could be down to the wire. I will pay attention to Carl. Carl is now at racing speed. This is going to be close, and he has just barely stayed in front. The situation is exactly the same as it was before, but technically Carl still has to warm up his tires. Not technically.
Exactly.
He very much does have to warm up his tires, which means Brenham may be thinking if there's ever a chance to make a move, it is now.
And I wonder if we're going to see that. Let's go on board with Brenham. He's diving to the inside. Looking. He is sticking it, but Carl on the outside. I think we'll get the run. Let's go back to the helicam.
Cool and does stay in front and is able to squeeze Brenham to the outside here. Brenham now having to back off, trying to get the better exit into the back straight. This is an interesting fight. Brenham definitely understands the gravity of this situation because as soon as Carl gets his tires heated up, and really that window might already be closed, but Brenham will need, or at least really, really would like to take advantage of this situation, and it doesn't look like he's able to. He had to back off there before the hairpin. So that is Carl Nordell keeping himself ahead during a very, very dicey situation.
Yeah, this is very, very close, and they are approaching Darren Chan, a lapped car, about to go, well, he might already be a lap or more down based on how many times he's had to go through the pit lane so far. Unfortunately, as we see Paul Krovs making his pit stop, he is going to be rejoining a few seconds behind this battle, which is about par of the course for where they were before the pit stops. Carl still trying to hold. Oystein really trying to get in his side mirrors as Darren just ducks out of the way. He does not want to be part of that battle.
And that was not a bad place to do it, to be honest. He just said, this is getting a bit too close. I'm sweating a bit too much. Gets out of the way and keeps his race going.
I just hope the game was smart enough not to give him a warning for going off track for getting out of the way of that.
That would be unfortunate, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, have there been any other drive-thrus that have come up for you?
Nothing's popped up yet. We have Kurt Peters in the pits, which is why he is showing his P2, and Magnus is currently the I'm going to call the gross leader, net leader of this race. Of course, still Carl Nordell. But Magnus having an okay race for himself, and Kurt Peters will have to see what happens as he comes out of the pits. He's hoping to be in front of Paul Krobs, but of course strategy changes may prevent that. So we'll just have to see what happens here.
Exactly, and I wanted to take a look at the data. So yeah, Oystein Brenham was stationary for 34.5 seconds. Carl Nordell stationary for 35. So in theory, Oystein would have been able to close that half-second gap to Carl that they had before the pits, but Carl must have had just a hell of an in-lap once he saw that Oystein was coming in and just gave it everything. As we see Kurt Peters exiting just behind, the gap I think has increased by a few seconds from himself up to P1 and P2. But still, overall, I mean, phenomenal race for Mr. Peters.
Agreed. Yep, still in P3 net, and as you mentioned, only a 3.5 second gap to Paul Krobs, but Kurt with the fresher tires, and he has shown the pace to keep him behind all race so far. Of course, 30 minutes left. Anything can happen. That's a lot of time and a lot of pressure for our drivers to make sure they don't make any mistakes. So, really, the only thing we can do is talk and wait for the drivers to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 4 minutes past the halfway mark, so there is still essentially another double what we've seen already, and that is what you have remaining. And we have seen quite a bit of on-track action that is only going to continue for the rest, especially between our top two drivers at the moment. Magnus still has to make his pit stop. That should relegate Carl and Brenham up to the lead, but at the same time, Carl and Brenham took tires. Magnus, I don't believe, took tires back in Suzuka. Of course, that's different. Wet weather tires do tend to last a little bit longer. You don't necessarily need to change tires to stay up on the pace. If Magnus did not take tires, he might come out in the lead of the race.
That is a very interesting proposition there. Yeah, it's tough to say. He's 55 seconds in front of Carl Nordell. I am not sure off the top of my head what a typical pit time would be. I believe it was around 70 for Brenham. So saving that 15-20 seconds is something that could be quite enticing, as we see Carl having to go a bit defensive there to keep Brenham behind.
Yeah, and Carl Nordell on those new tires last lap, a 35.2. Magnus Hakaba only about 4/10 off of that on his tires that have taken him up to this point. So if Magnus came in and didn't take tires, he would still be about the same pace, just losing a few tenths a lap. If he came out with, a 10 or 15 second gap, if he was managing the same pace that he is right now compared to Carl, he could just hold on to it. So we'll keep an eye on when Magnus does come into the pits. That could spice things up a little bit in this race.
Certainly could. One other thing I'm seeing here is that Paul Krobs is now only 1.7 seconds behind Kurt Peters. And that gap was, I believe, at 3.5 seconds when we last talked about it, maybe 3 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, what it is, as we see there, Kurt Peters making a mistake.
Darren.
Oh, that is Darren. Okay, never mind. There is Kurt Peters up in front. I was very confused, as I normally am.
But yeah, last lap, Paul a second faster than Kurt Peters.
That is a big gap.
And less than 2 seconds back, so Paul could be in touching distance in 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, certainly could be. What's different between stint 1 and stint 2? It's hard to say. But maybe there's fuel differences here that Paul was able to take advantage of. Maybe it's just nerves. It's hard to say. But what we can say for sure is that we may have a fight on our hands.
A fight indeed. And speaking of fights, Brenham is falling back just a little bit to Carl Nordell. That gap now closer to a second at 0.7 right now. Closer than it has been the last few. No, it goes back to 0.4. As soon as I click over, it likes to change the gaps on me. But yeah, a little bit of a bigger gap visually, it looks like.
Yeah, so I had that on my second screen here, and it looks like Gary Bosman getting out of the way just required Kurt to take like a slightly different line, not a problematically different line, but she just had to be cognizant of having another driver on his outside. So that might have just lost him a tenth or two there through the hairpin of turn 10, I believe, which may have caused that difference in the pace or in the gap.
Nope, that makes sense. But Brenham, yeah, closing that gap right back up again. Paul has lost a little bit of time to Kurt Peters. That gap is now at 2 seconds. We were just seeing it at 1.7 before. Charlie Thornton only 1 second behind Mercea, but before the pit stop, Charlie was right behind Jorge Esteban and is still about 11 or 12 seconds behind as Bryce Prevost into the pit lane making his pit stop, and we are still awaiting Magnus to come in for his stop.
Yeah, Magnus deciding to go long may be indicative of a tire-free strategy. Hard to say as we've got, Bryce Prevost now into the pits. Marcus Ness in the pits. I believe he may have been there for a little while yet. He might, his race might be done. He is 6 laps back, so yes, it looks like Marcus has decided to cut his losses here and head off.
That is definitely a bummer for Marcus, who had a pretty solid qualifying, but not the race start or ultimately the race that he would have wanted. Jorge does get past Bryce in the pit lane. Paul still working on closing the gap to Kurt Peters up ahead, and Charlie getting ever closer to Mercea.
Yes, Charlie, a delta to look at right now as we have Charlie just 1 second back of Hatisi. Marcus now in chat saying this was a terrible race on his part. Yeah, the start, getting that drive through at the start is always devastating for a race. And just not a lot of luck. So a race to forget, one to put on the shelf and prep up for the next one.
Absolutely. Definitely a bummer, Marcus. But again, thank you for the follow. We hope that in 2 weeks' time, you will have a much better race that is worthy of the pace that you have.
Certainly. Yeah.
Darren Chan. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Darren Chan currently working on a Gary Bosman fight for P12. Just he's actually getting pretty close. Let's take a look at that battle as Oystein Brenham is falling back behind Carl a little bit. So Darren Chan working on Gary Bosman, two pretty similarly colored cars, but Darren currently behind in the lower profile Ferrari. Darren leading the AM class before, but had a couple of misfortunes, having to do some trips through the pit lane early on, and that has set him a good amount behind as Bryce Prevost actually got by Mercea, and that is for position in the AM class. So let's actually take a look at that replay. So Bryce in the Red Bull liveried Ferrari up ahead. Mercea a good ways back, so I wonder if Bryce had a mistake which let Mercea capitalize going. No, it just looks like Bryce didn't have the best final corner. Mercea gets a pretty good run, and I think is just going to not absolutely send it. How did Mercea get by?
I wonder if it happened before the replay even, as we have... We've got marks all over the place. Now, Prevost and Hatisi, I don't believe there was anything more than a tap. Gary Bosman and Darren Chan, however, I believe they might be down for the count. And Darren Chan, I will say as well, has a second drive-through. So Darren, unfortunate. Whoa! It looks like Darren may have just made a mistake there. An odd mistake. And goes through the grass. And, that is... That's not great. That's not what you want to see.
No, in the cockpit view, it can be hard to see the cars around you. Yeah, Darren, a little deep on the brakes, takes evasive action, but goes to the inside, exactly where Gary was going to be putting his car in just a little bit, and they collide. Darren should have gone to the left rather than the right to avoid any contact. And now Darren getting passed again, but I wonder how much damage may now be on both of their cars, which may have made that pass easier for Darren. So that'll definitely be looked at by the stewards. And as you mentioned, there was a little bit of contact. Was it between Mercedes and Bryce?
I'm not exactly sure who it is. Oh my goodness, we have a drive-through penalty for Hatisi. That is drive-through number 5 for Hatisi. They had been having a great fight. The tap there, I believe, was nothing more than a tap. It wasn't anything that I noticed caused any problems. But now we have Hatisi in P8, but with a drive-through, and Prevo and Catalan having a good fight. But Prevo, I believe, currently, or Charlie, I should say, Charlie and Prevo having a good fight, and Charlie currently the one leading of those two.
And Gary, don't believe he had done a pit stop before, so he is in for his pit stop, probably to also fix a decent amount of damage. Darren in to serve his drive-through. Is he? Yeah, he is now out. So Darren is now through and back out on his way. Gary just completing his pit stop. So definitely a bummer that they had contact before. As we see Cataline pretty close behind Bryce Prevost.
Yeah, definitely a close fight here between Cataline and Prevost.
What happened to Hatisi? They went from like P7 to P14 out of nowhere.
Well, Hatisi, they had a drive-through penalty, so they had to go into the pits. So they are currently serving that drive-through, I believe. As we
I
can
see.
Here, he should be coming over, and there he is to serve his drive-through penalty. So that is why he fell so quickly.
Oh, and a little bit too much speed, got into the outside wall a little bit there on entry. Yeah, on my screen it just showed that he was in like P7 or 8 and then just immediately fell. So I was didn't even have other cars passing him. So I wondered if it was like a disconnect or something.
Oh, Hatisi's race has now gone from bad to worse. That is a stop-go 30 for Hatisi.
Oh, no. I thought he was going in pretty quickly. As Darren also having an incident. Let's see what happens to him. And we still need to keep an eye on Magnus Haukba. Has not come into the pits yet. I think at this point, he did probably fuel for the entire race at the start, and will be doing an extremely short pit stop when he ultimately does come in. And I think that is shades of Cataline. We have seen that same thing happen to quite a few drivers today, just not able to handle the speed of that fast right-hander.
Yeah, that's a spot that's caught out a lot of drivers and takes another victim. We do, of course, consistently have Oystein Brenham just a couple tenths back of Carl Nordell. This is a fight that could be... it's hard to say if or when this tension will be resolved, because with 20 minutes left, Carl Nordell has been doing great on the defense, but of course we can see here Brenham just very consistently right on the back of him, waiting for some kind of mistake.
Yeah, very tense battle that we have here as Mercedes. Did you see that on the screen? Mercedes was showing like P10 and they just immediately fall to P14.
That was strange. That was very strange, I would agree.
But yeah, that is just, again, another pit serving that stop-go 30 for a too fast entering, most likely. Bryce Prevost, we'll have to take a replay on Mr. Prevost. He was off track. A four-way battle here as Bryce and Cataline had the traffic coming through of Kurt Peters, and Paul Krobs was right behind. That was being lapped, and Paul Krobs kind of falls back to let this battle up ahead happen. Bryce maybe gets spooked a little bit by Cataline, carries too much speed, and goes off track there. Definitely a bummer for Paul, who we saw before. And now Paul and Catalina, looks like, have contact. They have some hazard flags next to their names, so that is definitely not what you want to see if you are trying to lap somebody. But as Paul Has Paul gotten by? I don't think so. So I think Cataline is still ahead. Let me try and find... No, Cataline was worse for wear from that. So Cataline has fallen back quite a bit and is now 6 seconds behind Bryce Prevost, whereas last lap through these corners, they were almost side by side. But ultimately, that did hurt Paul Krabs, who is now 2 seconds behind Kurt Peters. They were basically neck and neck last time around, and Brenham flirting between a 10th and 2 behind Carl Nordell, now a little bit longer as they are on one of the faster parts of the track. But yeah, as always, this battle at the front is one of our most contentious so far.
Yeah, it certainly is. Darren Chan, I think, has just gotten a third drive-through penalty, just to make note of that. Unfortunate how his race has fallen apart. But yeah, I've been keeping an eye on this fight between Nordell and Brenham, and it is relentless driving from Brenham trying to find an opening, and Carl just doing everything he can to hold it together. Still 18 minutes left in this race and change. A lot of time to be holding on to this kind of tension, but Carl so far has been doing a great job as he's about to get past some lap traffic here.
Absolutely. That is very nice of Mercia to get out of the way there, allow Carl and Brenham to keep their fight going. No impeding or anything there whatsoever, as Oystein just still glued to the back of that black Lamborghini. We see, Darren now, unfortunately, in last place. Gary Bosman, 30 seconds up ahead of him. Another 32 seconds up ahead is Mercia, who we see behind this battle of Carl and Oystein Brenham. 34 seconds up the road, Legere Simon. 44 seconds ahead is VNC Cataline. Then Prevost, a few seconds ahead. Charlie Thornton, 4 seconds ahead of Prevost, as Magnus Haukeba showing it showed him P1, it shows a yellow flag, and he drops immediately from P1 to P5.
Yeah, that's odd. I don't believe he is in P5. He is in the pits, is what it is.
Yep.
So
that just keeps scaring me.
Decided to pit. Yeah, no, that is quite scary. I get it. But yeah, Magnus finally deciding to pit. Let's see if he takes tires. I would be shocked if he was stationary for more than 10 seconds here.
Yep, we are, and it's already longer than I would have expected. This is,
it is. Is he taking tires after all that? Yeah, he's got to be. He's still stationary. That's got to be a 30
And I see Carl and Oystein coming up in the background. We see Jorge passing there, and there's those two drivers. So yeah, Magnus is not going to do the unexpected, what we thought, not taking tires and going to the end. We'll take a very, very brief break to look at the season overview, to look at the rules. So 60-minute pit window, mandatory pit stop, but it's a mandatory refuel only. I just wanted to check that quickly. So Magnus did not have to take tires. We're going to see his stationary time in just a little bit. Yeah, stationary for 36 seconds. As Jorge Esteban was showing a yellow flag. Let's get a replay on him.
Yeah, we don't need a replay. Oh, okay. He was just getting out of the way of our front runners, and he did so in sort of an odd way. But yeah, no, nothing to see here. We'll let the replay play out as he decides to just make sure he's not impeding here.
No, that makes sense. Oh yeah, well. A little bit of a moment, but it did make sure that he got out of the way.
No worse for wear. He kept it out of the wall. So that's. Yep. I didn't see any. I guess I didn't realize that he'd gotten squirrely. I thought he had just gotten scared.
No, he did have another moment. Again, could be down to him not taking tires, but Charlie, who did take tires, has not been able to make any head roads on. Catching up, still about 12 seconds behind Jorge Esteban, and Oystein still a couple of tenths behind Carl. I wonder if this is going to be the move. Looks to the inside, just not enough speed.
Nothing to do there. One other thing we haven't mentioned for a little while, but Okay, let's hope these drivers have good connections.
Oh.
And you know what? We don't have time because Brenham is on the inside here. He is trying to make the move. He is now still on the inside. Carl doing everything he can to hold on to this position, but of course now having to give up some of his exit. But I think that was Brenham with a bit of a moment, which means he does not get to take advantage. And that is Carl holding off another attack from Oystein Brenham. And what a masterful defense there from Carl, just holding on to this first place with everything he's got.
Yeah, very self-aware driving from Carl. Yeah, Brenham had a couple of moments trying to get by, maybe a little too little. That didn't make sense. Maybe his traction control is a little too low. Trying to get a bit too eager on the throttle, upset the rear end of that BMW, and he was not able to capitalize on the outside through turn 7 or 8 roundabout there.
Getting squirrely again.
Getting squirrely again.
Yeah, you can see both of these drivers, even with the tire change, they are struggling. We haven't mentioned it yet, but it is an ambient temperature 30 degrees, track temp 36, so it is hot out there. Makes sense why our drivers would want to be switching tires. But yeah, that fight there just showing these drivers trying everything they can within the limits of their cars and their tires to make a move or to hold it off. What I was going to mention just quickly is Kurt Peters having still a fantastic race, keeping that gap to Paul Krobs consistent, and so far we haven't seen even a sniff of a fight there between the two.
We've had a little sniff of a fight between Jorge Esteban and Mercea. Jorge was showing a hazard flag, Mercea was not. Yeah, just gets a little tap on the rear end. Just wanted to take a quick replay on this to see what happened there. No harm, no foul, but yeah, definitely a couple of moments recently for Jorge Esteban.
Yes. Brenham back to fighting with Carl right on the back. This is a fight that is going to be hard to pull away from for the next little bit, because every time we have something interesting has happened, we can see he's got speed right now as he goes wide, trying to take advantage of that speed difference between himself and Carl, but of course not able to make it work once again. Carl just not giving him an inch when all Brenham would need is 2, and that is once again Carl finishing up this lap in first place. 12 minutes left to go. That's going to be 6 to 7 to 8 laps, maybe more. And wow, this fight is just something special.
Yeah, it almost goes back to what we were talking about in qualifying with 10 minutes per class in qualifying. There's not a lot of time for opportunities to get in a lap. With only 11 and a half minutes left in the race, there's not a lot of opportunities to make an overtake, because Reagan said it before, there really are only a couple of places you can make a move if the driver ahead of you doesn't make a mistake. So it is winding down, maybe only a handful of opportunities left for Brenham to make the move. I'm sure when Carl got past him right at the first corner on lap 1, he was probably thinking, oh, this will be easy. I have 75 minutes to get back past. Now with 11 minutes left, I'm sure his hands are getting a little sweaty, knowing that he has to make something happen soon if he wants to defend his record of winning every race that he has been in.
And you have to be careful, of course, because the tires of both drivers are clearly not where they were at the start of this race. Tires are dropping off quite aggressively for both drivers, and that makes it a lot tougher for Brenham to know the limits of what he can do with his car. And of course, it also means that Carl has to be very cognizant of what he needs to do to keep himself in front with the tires waning. I mean, we can even see just a lot more jerking of the wheel than you would expect at the start of a stint. That looked nice and smooth through that turn, but we have seen over and over again these little corrections that Brenham has had to be making, and I'm sure Carl is doing the same.
Yeah, I mean, I hate when I have to jerk my wheel too much or too quickly. You know, you need a good rhythm of jerk for the wheel. Jerking too quickly or even too slowly can be detrimental to your race. You need to make sure that you do what is best for the car to make sure that you get the optimal performance out of it with your jerk.
That's really where you wanted to take that one, huh? I'm okay. You know what? Sure. I would be fascinated to see what was going on in your head before that one, but okay. Yep. It wasn't the worst I've heard. It was certainly something.
Yeah, I really had no follow up to what you were.
And Marcus just burying the lead there a little bit. Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, at the
sometimes
end
we
of
get
it,
confused.
in 9 minutes, we're really gonna see who came in first. You know?
Jesus fucking Christ, Steven. This is a family show. What are you doing?
Is it?
Yeah, this is for the kids. Come on. As Brenham and Carl have a touch there, it looks like Carl left the door open a little bit more than he had before. They are side by side. We do not have time to talk about, well, you know, anything other than the race, as Carl Nordell is able to once again stay in front. What a battle we have here. Yeah, I agree with you, Marcus. I am also speechless by
Brenham,
the quality of this battle here.
Brenham really came up the inside there hard and fast.
Oh my God.
Made some unfortunate contact there. But yeah, after all of that, it then gets into the marbles a little bit, gets squirrely. I really thought that was going to be the end of it for Carl, but yeah, that is Brenham still in P2, not able to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, don't encourage him. Don't encourage Steven. He doesn't need any more encouragement. Good Lord.
I'm trying to think of
I know. I shouldn't have left this silent. And we've got once more. We still see Brenham turning the wheel somewhat aggressively from left to right. Have to be careful with my wording here, and not as close to the back of Carl that we've seen before. Does look like with 7.5 minutes left. Ooh, that was Carl getting a little squirrely. We get to see a lot from this camera angle of how Carl's car is performing, and as well how Brenham's car is performing on these tires. Paul Krob's consistently 2 seconds back of Kurt Peters, which means Kurt has been able to keep that gap nice and steady. Still a fantastic drive from him. The gap's sort of calming down everywhere except for the front of the grid. It looks like still a chance maybe for Paul to do something if he's able to keep it together, but it's going to be tough. Kurt is keeping him real honest and having a phenomenal race up in P3.
Yep, excellent for Kurt. I don't think we've mentioned that Darren has been in the pits for a good while. I think he did decide to park it after the couple of drive-thrus and everything that he has had for track limits and a couple incidents here and there. So Darren is out of it, out of courtesy. Yeah, just not the race I'm sure you wanted, Darren. You had plenty of pace out there. Really sucks to see, but hopefully at the next round we'll be able to see you capitalize on that pace and get a good result. We know it's coming soon.
Definitely. Yep. Paul 1.7. It's fluctuating, but again, that is the closest gap we're seeing outside of this battle for P1. We've got Prevo 3.2 back of Charlie and Catalan 3.2 back of Prevo. A little bit of parallel spacing there, but really our eyes are on this battle here, as there's really not a lot to be watching. Again, it should be emphasized to any of the viewers who don't know this. I'm sure you all do, but every race that Oystein Brenham has participated in, he has won between Season 3 and Season 4. This is the first time in, I believe, any race that he has participated in, he has not been in first place in the last 20 minutes of the race, let alone the last 5. So really getting down to crunch time. Lots of pressure on Carl Nordell to keep it together. Lots of pressure on Brenham to try to find a way past.
Yeah, I think the last time we saw Carl sneak around the outside of Brenham at the start of a race was Barcelona last season, and Carl was able to keep Brenham honest for a good portion of the race, but I think it was about 30 or 40 minutes in. Carl went a little too deep into a corner that allowed Brenham to get past, and then Brenham just ran away with it after that. This is the first time where, Brenham has had to fight tooth and nail for the entire race, and with less than 5 minutes left, about 3 laps potentially on the table. I mean, Brenham at this point, I don't think is going to be winning this race. Carl has been doing an absolutely perfect job defending that lead, and Brenham is not able to find any way past that black Lamborghini. So I think
you were saying some big words with 4 minutes left in this race. I don't think anybody should be counting out Brenham at any point in the race. And until Carl is across the line, I would not be confident that. I would not be that confident he's winning this race. There is still a lot left to be done.
I'm confident. That's my prediction. I think Brenham won the first 2 races. I think Carl is going to win Suzuka and here Misano.
It certainly would be interesting. I may have to. Here, a little bit of contact there. Again, we've got contact between Nordell and Brenham. Just little taps, but you can see that Brenham is maybe trying to find some more aggressive ways to get past. Both drivers able to keep it together, but just barely, as there are taps galore between the 2 drivers.
Yeah, I almost had to eat my words there. Right as I was saying, I thought Carl was going to win. Brenham was sending it up the inside. But yeah, just a little bit of contact. Nothing doing there. Brenham almost giving Carl a little speed boost on the exit of turn 1, turn 2 there. Johan saying, go Kurt Peters. Kurt Peters is going. He has been going all race. Only 5 seconds still behind our leaders. So by far, a huge lead over Charlie Thornton in P2 in the silver class. Like almost, Ivan is 58 seconds behind Magnus, and Jorge is another 64 seconds behind that. So Kurt, I think at this point has lapped Charlie at some point.
That very well could be the case. I just want to jump because we have Darren saying in the chat that Esteban had a spin. And we do have Charlie 0.4 behind now. That was a gap that I wasn't paying a lot of attention to. So it's true, Jorge may have created a bit of a tense end to the race for himself. Didn't catch it on camera, but that is something to keep an eye on. Is Charlie 0.3 back? Hard to keep our eyes off of this fight. But that is a delta we'll have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it might have happened when we were on the replay last lap between Oystein and Carl. But yeah, that gap we mentioned just a little bit ago was about 12 seconds. Charlie wasn't able to make any headroom there, but now that is 0.2 seconds, and Charlie getting ever so close to nabbing. P7 overall wouldn't really do him too much because he would still be P2 in the silver class, but for a source of pride would be nice for him.
And of course, the overall championship, getting those points doesn't hurt either. It's always nice to have some points on the board for the overalls, even when you're in a silver class. So still something to fight for there, and certainly for Jorge, who only competes in the open class. Definitely something to fight for him.
Yep, and as Brenham and Nordell come to the final corners of this lap 45, when they cross the line this time, it will be their final lap. So Brenham, if he wants to make something happen, he has to do it in the next 16 or 17 corners.
And this is what we have all been waiting for. Carl Nordell still in front of this race. Brenham hounding him, doing everything he can, trying to get a move done. He is 0.4 back here as we cross the line and start the final lap. This is it.
Yeah, Brenham not as close in the turn 1 through 3 complex that we've seen in the last few laps, or just a lap or two ago when they had contact through there. I think Brenham might just be saving it for the straights, trying to set himself up well there, but he really has to get closer if he wants to make any sort of challenge on this last lap.
Well, it looks like Carl might have gotten a little squirrely there because this is Oyston gaining a little bit. He does dive down the inside, and Carl recognizes the mistake. What phenomenal patience and racecraft from Carl Nordell, recognizing that Brenham has gone deep, letting him by, and making the calm switchback. That was phenomenal driving. After the race, we may have to go back and watch that. But right now, we have just 5, I believe, more corners for Brenham to try to make a move, and he is not able to get a run that he wants here the way that he has in some previous laps. Still catching up, but not at a way that he would be able to make any sort of dive bomb. They are catching up to a lapped car, which is definitely potentially going to add some trouble here. Hopefully not, as we have Brenham right on the back, thinking about a move down the inside of the final turn. He does stick his nose in, but Carl Nordell safely, calmly keeps it together and is going to cross the line in P1. That is Carl Nordell, the first to take down the Titan.
That was, immaculate. Absolutely amazing. There was that lap car. I don't think they did too much there. Kurt Peters driving by to celebrate those two as they return to the garage. Paul Krobs crosses in P4. Magnus not too far behind those two. And now we still have a long wait before we see Yvonne Watson coming through to take the line. He is about halfway through the track. So yeah, quite the gap between our top 5 and then the rest of our drivers down below. But man, that was an entire race-long battle, but really came to blows a little bit in those last few laps.
Yeah, certainly did, as Brenham was trying everything he could to try to make a move. Goes for the dive bomb down to turn 10. Not necessarily, I should not call that a dive bomb. Goes for the aggressive move in turn 10. Carl recognizes it. And of course, Carl able to calmly make the switch back. That is such a stressful decision to make on the fly, to let Brenham get past, trusting that you'll be able to take it back within the exit of the turn. And he made the right decision there. Carl Nordell, the first driver to win a race other than Oystein Brenham when Brenham is participating. So a phenomenal job from him. And of course, a phenomenal job from Brenham keeping it together. Still a phenomenal drive for him, a P2. And Kurt Peters, the other driver who deserves as much praise as we can give him. That is Kurt Peters, a silver driver finishing in P3 in front of Paul Krobs, Magnus Yvonne, and Jorge, and all of the other pro drivers. So really phenomenal drive from Kurt as well.
Yeah. And Charlie did not take tires, actually. We saw that he was stationary for just about 30 seconds, but that was not for tires. So that explains why he wasn't able to catch up as quickly to Jorge Esteban, but ultimately, it does finish P2 overall, just a few tenths behind Jorge Esteban after Jorge had a bit of a late spin in the race. But yeah, some interesting results. Jorge, pretty good overall. Not even good, but he started P15, last place at the start of this race, up 8 positions and beating quite a few drivers to the line. So solid race for Jorge. Yvonne a little bit in no man's land in P6 overall. But yeah, quite a few battles up the front. Carl versus Brenham, Peters versus Paul Krobs. Great stuff going on. Let's go ahead and take a look at that replay from the Helicam. Reagan, you had mentioned looking at Brenham versus Carl on that last lap. I went too far ahead.
Yes, it would be right here that we can take a look at Oystein Brenham. We can see there just a little bit of squirreliness from Carl Nordell, which allows Brenham to start gaining here on this back straight. goes onto the inside, brakes as late as he can, and Carl recognizes that and allows Brenham to go by. Carl then calmly doing the switchback again on the last lap, allowing a driver of Brenham's caliber to go by to say, I don't believe you. I don't believe you can make that turn, and to be making the right call. That is a decision that he will be smiling about for a long time.
Yep, a very, very nice race from Carl Nordell. As I was saying before, I mean, I think perfect defensive job the entire race. Knew when Brenham was going to make a move. Brenham as well, some good awareness from himself. He knew a couple times that he was too hot in the braking zones, had some good evasive maneuvers to make sure he didn't get into the back of Carl, and that they had some good clean battles throughout the race. So just overall, I mean, spectacular racing from those two drivers. Very, very good battle throughout the whole 75 minutes.
Certainly is, and you have to wonder if this is possibly going to change Brenham's strategy moving forward. Of course, you could see he had the pace there to be able to keep Nordell behind if he was in front. There's no questioning that Brenham had the pace, but he has very consistently held the strategy of taking it easy on that first lap, not really minding letting a driver by, and knowing that he'll be able to make the difference in the later laps. This is the first time that strategy has not worked for him, and definitely one that maybe he will be trying to consider being more aggressive in future drives. But of course, that is a decision that only he can make for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just some very good patience overall, but next time he might not be so kind about letting Carl through at the start of the race, because Carl, I mean, he did have some speed around the outside at turn 1 on the first lap, but Oystein, it seemed, was braking very, very early and was very hesitant. So next time around at Silverstone, it might not be so kind between Oystein and whoever is following just to the side of him going into the first corner.
Yeah, something that we'll only be able to find out for sure on September 30th at Silverstone, the next race number 5.
Indeed. We cannot wait to see you there. Any thoughts about either looking forward to Silverstone or looking back on Misano before we head out of here, Reagan?
I mean, this is a race that was fun to watch from start to finish. Lots of fights around the board, lots of overtakes, a couple incidents that some drivers will want to forget. Lots going on, but certainly I think there was a lot to be excited for going into the next round.
Indeed, and I'm just taking a look at the event configuration. We have a 50% cloud level, rain a little bit lower at 15%, but the weather randomness is set to 6, which kind of on the scale of 0 to 9 for weather randomness in ACC, that is pretty close to you never know what you can expect at the start of a session. So I think we might be in for some spicy weather when we get to Silverstone in 2 weeks' time. So that'll also be something to be looking forward to.
Yeah, always exciting to get a little bit of weather randomness. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Well, for now, we will go ahead and leave it off for the one viewer who is still with us. Thank you for sticking around. We will see you in 2 weeks' time. And until then, take it easy and have a good rest of your day.
See ya.